Get ready for real and raw discussions as we dive into
navigating mixed-race relationships and motherhood,
to the intersections of our lives,
money, and so much more.
So the holidays are coming up.
Holidays are coming up, like lots of holidays. Well, depending on where you live.
'Tis the season in some ways, right? Like, so no, for real, like Jewish holidays are around this time.
Yep.
Indian holidays also mimic this time. And then, of course, like our world, Christian /
American.
it's now.
Yeah, it is now. Even like Canadian Thanksgiving was a couple of weeks ago. Like September is a time where I know there's I had never say it right. Is it Hashanah or is it Hashanah? Like I don't
know. No, Rosh Hashanah.
And then there's like, which is Jewish New Year. Yeah. Yes. And then so many different ones throughout the next several months leading up to the traditional New Year. What is called there's a name for it. The New Year that the world celebrates. Yeah, there's a particular name because so many cultures don't celebrate that as their New Year, right? So there's a particular name to our New Year that we celebrate.
Yeah, I don't know that. Yeah. I know there's a Lunar New Year, which is also the Chinese New Year.
There's a bunch of New Years. There's a Greek Orthodox New Year, Gregorian New Year's is in the Gregorian calendar.
Oh, interesting. We're considered a Gregorian calendar.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So people who follow, which is the world, a lot of the world outside of, I guess, in smaller groups, they celebrate their own particular customary New Year. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we have a bunch of stuff coming up, and it's can be a really hard time for people, like, to navigate personally. And then if you're in a relationship, I think sometimes that adds a lot of, this is a time of year that can add a lot of friction and a lot of internal strife because there's a lot of external pressure and decisions to be made and choices that you have to like navigate. Is that something that comes up for you guys? Like, how do you guys do the holidays?
You know, we were just talking about it last night. Like we've done different things over the years, but neither one of us has a strong like desire or a strong like family network that we need to participate in. Mm-hmm. Not that we wouldn't if we were invited, but it's just not a strong thing. Okay. Right? So we both have siblings, but our siblings do their own thing. Okay. And there isn't like, oh, the family is all getting together, so you should come right. and visit or anything like that.
Okay. Did you ever grow up with that?
We did have, growing up, it wasn't like a huge ordeal. It was like, oh, we're going to have family over for Christmas, or we're going to have family over around Christmas or Diwali for sure.
Growing up?
Yeah, we did. I mean, whatever celebrating means, we got presents.
Right. Right. I imagine you weren't going to church and so on. Yeah.
No church. We didn't really have any like tradition. We had a really crappy tree that just like all kinds of
snow.
We had that tree for like 25 years. Like it didn't change. It didn't get it was like the ugliest thing ever. But my parents like just they got it the first or second Christmas that we were in the US, and then it stayed, and it was just here to stay.
Gotcha.
So, but it was like whatever. It wasn't like a dinky little tree. It wasn't huge. It was like a medium-ish tree that was plastic, that looked very plastic.
Okay. I mean, hey.
So you have a visual, and then there were presents under it, and that's pretty much it. Okay. Like that was our Christmas growing up.
I think that's probably a lot of immigrant family Christmases. Like, I don't think that, there's not the same context to it. So you kind of like assimilate and make it what you can make it, I think. I'm talking more so about our parents' generation, where that wasn't something that they grew up with. So they were assimilating into, Western Christian culture. And like it didn't mean probably more to them than some presents and a tree, because that's what you're quote unquote supposed to do. And that's what they see on TV and people doing. Like, I can't imagine there's a lot of sentiment that was associated with it, and probably more like we're doing this for the kids. Like, that's like, so the kids have the experience of it.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And there was some like correlativeness to like, oh, this is like the American Diwali, right? Like, is Diwali sort of like Christmas, New Year's, their New Year's similar to our New Year's, right? So they try to like draw parallels.
Okay.
And I was like, but we don't get presents on Diwali. Why don't we get presents for Diwali?
In India, don't they do gifts
On Diwali.
I don't know with Diwali.
Maybe now they do, because they're like, oh, well, Americans do gifts on Christmas, so we should do.
I think it's more of exchanges. Like, I think it's like more of an offering, right? Like sweets, things like that. Not like, oh my God, we're ripping through 25 presents because we have this expectation that we're supposed to get some shit because it's some random day, which is what I feel about Christmas.
No, yeah, no, it's not. It's probably not that way, but I think there is Diwali. From my memory of it, we actually got lots of clothes and shoes and stuff like that on Diwali. Not wrapped as presents. Okay. It was more like, let's go shopping and you can get a new outfit.
Like an Indian outfit or like a
regular. Oh. Like whatever new clothes you want to wear.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I did not have that. But we did not celebrate Diwali. So Diwali for Bengalis is not a thing. Yeah. Durga Puja, which is pre-Diwali, like the last, it's a 10-day thing. So that is a huge thing.
Durga Puja as in Navratri? Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. And like, since you're probably more familiar with it than I am, what is the significance of that holiday?
So it is in celebration of the goddess Durga. Yeah. And it is a 10-day, so there are different things and different offerings over the course of the 10 days. And so there is an element, again, of offering there, but it is sort of just the worship of her being the most supreme goddess. And
I think she like triumphed over some evil, something or other.
Annual festival originating in the Indian subcontinent, which reveres and pays homage to the Hindu goddess Durga, and is also celebrated because of Durga's victory over Mahishasura. Mm-hmm. It is particularly celebrated in the Indian state of West Bengal, Odisha, Tripura, Bihar, Jharkhand, Eastern Uttar Pradesh, Assam, and by Hindus in Bangladesh. Yeah, so it is a huge Bengali celebration. It is definitely the one that Bengalis celebrate the most. They get off school for a month for Durga Puja. It's huge.
So what do you, like, if you were living in West Bengal or in Calcutta, what would you be, how would you be celebrating?
A lot of, they do a lot of idols, so of Durga and of Durga's different conquests. And there's a lot of parading of Durga through the streets with the idols. They make these beautiful, beautiful, like huge sculptures and representations. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of offerings again, because in Hinduism, I think we do that a lot, where it's like a lot of offerings to flowers, food, etc., to feed the gods. And there's a lot of that, a lot of visits to the temple, lots of prayers, lots of, and it's not so different than Diwali in the sense that it's always the darkness or light over darkness, like conquering darkness, a new beginning. And it is essentially the mark of starting over. And because it's a 10-day celebration, every day has a different sort of focus and intention, and they get off school. So everybody is sort of participating and able to worship in whatever way that they prefer. It is, I would say that is for sure like the Christmas times 100. Like it is a huge, huge, huge thing. And growing up, we would attend Durga Puja every single year, and it would be in people's homes. It would be also in the temples. Like we had the Bengali community in Toronto, we had two major places that we would go, one big temple and then one that we call the club, which was more for performances and functions and also for these pujas. So it would be thousands of people. And this is like the community. This is what we did every single year. And we would go to Durga Puja and it would be, we would go for 3 subsequent days, sometimes for 2 weekends, because again, it was 10 days. So there would be weekday stuff, but the weekends obviously is when all the people could really go because people would work and stuff. But it would start even like in people's homes, like they would do small Durga Pujas like privately for friends and family. And then we had these big ones that we would also go to and get very dressed up. And it was, there are performances, lots of things.
Is there the dancing around the Durga idol?
Bengalis don't do a whole bunch of dancing of any sort. Bengalis are like the brain Indian people where they just kind of read books and like don't do a whole bunch of, everything is like done. Like I appreciate about Gujaratis and Punjabis, like the more outward expression of fun. Bengali people are not fun.
Really?
It's very like it's classical music and it's like very.
It's like very Kathak dance.
It's not even Kathak dance. It's like no, because it's South Indian dance. It's very like it's a class. Like it's very. I'm trying to find the word for it. Very classical, very traditional, very boring, and it's hard because the boringness of it for you, if you're young, growing up in a Western culture, trying to understand your heritage and your culture, it doesn't make you want to learn a lot because it's not very fun and it feels very heavy and it feels very and listen, maybe growing up in India with a big celebration of it, it's a different thing and a different experience. I don't know, but I'm just able to speak about my own experience. And the fun of it would be the socializing part. It would be seeing everybody. It would be seeing the performances that were happening at puja. I was also involved in a lot of that. I did Indian music and so on for many, many years. So we would always have stuff that we were doing. And eventually people would make it fun. So we would do a fashion show. We would do like different things. But the actual celebration of like the religious part of it, we didn't really understand a lot of it, right? And the music part of it wasn't
not cool, not fun. That's very interesting. So Durga is also the goddess that is the focal point of Navratri, which is 9 nights instead of 10, but it's centered around dance. So no, Garba, which I'm sure you've heard of,
yes,
is like all, that's it. That's all there is. Dancing.
I know. Lots of dancing and fun dancing and upbeat and it's energy and it's, trust me, as Bengalis, like, of course, again, growing up in Toronto, there's a huge Indian community. So we all, yes, we were Bengalis, but we had friends who were Gujarati, Punjabi, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so we would be jealous as shit. Like the Gujarati, of course we could, but it wasn't our culture, right? And that's the thing about being Indian. It's like, it's not one thing. It's so many, so when it's not your culture, it's hard to, like your parents aren't going to like Garba, you know what I mean? And so there was a lot of that for sure. So we were exposed to all of it. And I'm telling you, us Bengalis were like, why can't we do that fun stuff? Like ours was so like just tempered and like proper and like, it's just like always based on like intellect. And I'm like, okay, they're smart too. They having fun though. They having fun.
It was a lot of fun. I can't even believe that I haven't been to Garba in like 20 years. It's so sad.
Yeah. Do you feel like, you want to expose your family, not just even having a child, but like your family to that stuff?
Jason's not into it. He has said, I'm not really like, I'm not going to dance. I don't know how to dance. I'm going to stick out like a sore thumb, like not try to do any of it. So he wouldn't be into it. Diwali, on the other hand, he's taken an interest in. The funny thing is, when we first moved here, I did get involved or try to get involved in the Indian community and was the host MC of this event
And I think we talked
for
about
our
this on a previous
community.
episode.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. And I was in the fashion show and I did the like a dance thing. So I felt very like good about being part of that in some way. And my thought was that as Avery got older, we would like tap into it more. Um and I'm just thinking about this, like I don't feel as tapped in anymore. I am not necessarily like super deep into the Indian community. And I don't know if we're doing a Diwali this year, but it 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 became a political thing in some ways. So the people that were running it was all this drama. I was I was hearing all the drama. Uh, but because of that, like it's probably not happening again.
That particular function.
That's the Diwali function. And like that's pretty much it. Like there's gonna be a holy celebration. It's cool, whatever. You know what Holi is? Yeah, okay.
I've been to India for Holi before. Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, doing it in India is a whole different experience for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So they'll have that again. But that's it. That's kind of it as far as Indian holidays go and celebrations and stuff. And I was thinking like, oh, it'd be fun to like host a Diwali dinner or something. And I'm also like, really?
Or not. Yeah, like I sometimes feel badly because when I look back on my childhood and my experience, I'm only, I think, realizing with a lot of emphasis now how much of it was colored by the culture, right? Like, of course, I know that on a level, but it was my life. So you just, like, you have to really actively think about it. And then how much of that my kids don't have and are not exposed to. And that if they don't have it and are not exposed to it, then it goes away completely. But they are still of me and they are still Indian. And that is starting to bother me a little bit. I just don't know what to do about it because I don't feel super plugged in. I was looking at a friend of mine, she went to she's very, very involved in the Indian community. She's Indian and her husband is Indian. And therefore, you know, like it's just different. It's just different. And her work is even around Indian people. And I was looking at some pictures of her at a Indian wedding the other day when her kids are dressed up and, you know, just that environment. And I think part of it is because one, I don't live in the place that I was born and raised, and I left when I was 17. So I have already become detached. Two, because I was always with people who are not Indian. I've never been with an Indian person. So since 17, I've been detached. And I'm 44. So really more of my life.
Spend more of your time outside of that.
And as much as like there's a longing for the exposure for the kids, I honestly will say I don't really know how to do it because at this point, we're not going to a bunch of weddings because all my friends are already done married 20 years. Like it's over. We've aged out of that group.
Right.
You know, we're not local to where my access would be to the Indian community, which is Toronto, where my parents still go to a ton of things. So we would have a lot of access if we lived there, but I don't live there.
Here's an idea, because I'm with you. Like I'm also disturbed by all of it. There are Indian organizations here that we could become a part of.
Yeah, but then I don't want to do that either. Would they like us? Would they accept us?
No, I don't. I don't know, but like that's kind of what I experienced here. I was like really excited to like be part of the Indian community and like do all the things, but I feel like I've been extricated from it. Like I see the people that was friends with that are posting on social, and I'm like, "Hey, you hosted this thing at your house. You didn't invite me." Right? And I think part of it is like they assume I'm not into it.
Because you have a Black husband? We're not Indian enough. And that's the truth. I mean, the truth is like, and this is the thing, right? And I think that people who listen to us who are in interracial marriages or relationships themselves can probably, or people of, some sort of immigrant descent or, have a particular ethnic background can probably empathize with, wanting to feel connected, but being different than and therefore not being accepted by, right? And because you've made different choices doesn't make you any less in desire or interested. And maybe it does on a level. So let me actually rephrase that. I think it changes the scope with which you look at it. And I think the scope does make you show up differently, right? Because you cannot, at least from the Indian experience of things, generally people who are super involved in that stuff are looking at it through a particular lens and maybe would not choose make some of the choices that we have made. Although I'm thinking of a friend of mine who is in a Blindian relationship and has been for 20 plus years. She's got 2 beautiful children and she's South Indian and super into Hinduism, tradition, culture. Her kids know way more about Indian everything than she does a very good job also of exposing them to their African American side, but they know so much, so much, so much. So I know it's possible. I've watched her do it.
Yeah.
And I've low-key looked at her like, how do you do that? Like, how do you, but she's super tapped in. So she, to me, is an anomaly, like where she also presents very Indian, which is interesting because she's got a Black husband. She presents very Indian. And she grew up in the US and all the things, but
I want to meet her. How can we get her on this podcast?
Her on the podcast. And she is a brilliant, brilliant woman. And she has studied, she's an author. She's been on all the.
This is the woman that's been like in a Blindian relationship for a long time, written about it, kind of exposed you to.
She is the first person who used the term Blindian that I was exposed to. And that was when I met her right after her daughter and Asaya went to the same daycare. And so, I mean, in Brooklyn, you're not coming upon a bunch of Blindians, right? So we met each other and we're like, wait a second, like what the hell? And our kids' daycare was predominantly Black. And so we were clearly 2 Indian women who were sending our kids to a Black daycare, who felt very comfortable sending our children to a Black daycare. And it got more diverse as the neighborhood gentrified. And then it became like, where did all these white kids coming from? I remember at the time, just a quick side note, there was one little white girl, I will never forget, Lucy, who was in their class. And I just thought it was the coolest thing for their parents, for Lucy and her sister's parents, to send them to this daycare with open arms, full trust, no problem that their kids were the only white kids in the school. Like they had no issue with this. And I thought that was the dopest thing ever. Yeah. And they were super like, so what? It's a great daycare. Like there's situations where there are Black kids who are the only one. So now our kids are the only one. Like that was their mindset. And I thought that was amazing.
Yeah. That's such a rare mindset. I'm sure.
Such a rare mindset. But point being, so yes, this is that woman who has, she has walked this walk for a very long time, and she has a depth of information about it. But she has done a fantastic job of like keeping the culture very alive in her.
And she's doing it in Brooklyn, which has some, like there's Indians, but is it that Indian? No. So we're
in New Jersey, and there's a big Indian population, huge in New Jersey. You grew up in New Jersey, so you know that, right? there's a huge population in New Jersey.
Yeah. So she has family in New Jersey.
She has some family, and I think she just stays exposed and stays in a circle and does stuff privately at home too, where she will just keep the traditions alive at home and do things. And that's just something that does not come to me naturally. It does not occur to me to do it. And I didn't connect to it growing up. So it would be really foreign to me to start to integrate that stuff, because it just
not at the top of your forefront. Yeah. Yeah, I think I am very similar. I never really connected to it to begin with. And then like the things that I did connect with are like I'm so far removed from it. Like Gerba was probably it for me. Like I love to dance. I can do all the moves.
I want to see this.
I could do all the moves. Keep all those now. I'm gonna go and be like, oh shit, everything has changed. Yeah, it's very possible that I know no moves anymore. So there's a part of me that is like in fear or in like hesitation around it because I feel so far removed. Like I didn't uh, when I lived in Jersey, I had my crew, right? And we were like the Indian crew. And we spent every single weekend together. So like Gerba was never a question. It was like, which one are we going to 3 days in a row? And we're gonna keep doing that all month long. And then when I moved out of Jersey, I didn't have as many Indian friends. And then I've just like moved in so many places.
It's hard to keep up with it then.
And yeah, and I never really like cultivated a crew again. It's always like random, right? Like, oh, I have these friends and I have those friends and I have those friends, but they don't all love each other.
Yeah. And you know what? I will say, like being Indian, it is a little bit more complicated because we can all be Indian, but have completely different ways of like that we grew up celebrating stuff. So it's not like, oh, well, because I have this Indian crew, we're all going to go do Garba. Like, no, because like a Bengali doesn't participate in Garba, and
Our South Indian friend is not going to go to Gerba.
Punjabi person not going to do Garba. They're going to do different things. And then you have like Punjabis, they're Sikhs. So you have a whole different religion going on. So it does become more complicated for sure. But like, it's the aspect of having those traditions and those yearly things that I want to start to implement.
But what does it give us? Like, what does the tradition give us that we're missing out on, or that our kids are missing?
Not necessarily that. I just want to build in traditions with my family that are centered around something. And if it's and that I think is the beautiful opportunity for every new family, right? Like, especially when you're interracial, intercultural, interfaith, that you get to decide what parts you integrate, what you make it to be. But a lot of people don't feel that way about it. A lot of people are very protective of their own and want it to be theirs. Especially, I think you and I also have the experience of not having a bunch of family influence on it because we don't have big families and we don't have a lot of extended family that have had influence or have still influence. Whereas a lot of people, they have all their aunts and uncles and all their cousins and all their grandparents and their parents. Everybody is coming together to do these things. And they still live in the place that they were born and raised. So they have constant exposure and constant expectations and pressure. And so then they feel more compelled to do these things, but then they've chosen an interracial or interfaith relationship. It's like, so then how do we do all of this? I just had a consultation with a couple and she's Indian and he's Black, but they're both Christian. But she's Indian, but she's Indian Christian. right? And she was
And like, I think if you share a religion, that also changes the dynamic.
changes the dynamic. But in this case, it was interesting because the focus was more on the Indianness, because the way that her church, her Indian Christian church, does Christianity is so different than how he was raised in Christianity. And she was raised in a Puritan Indian Christian church. So there was this sort of Puritan idea that she grew up with, this narrative. And
What's the narrative of that?
about purity and women and women's place and women's rights and or lack of. And there's shame around body and like no sex until marriage type thing, which I think is in general the case, but there's a lot of shame in the way that she was raised.
Can I tell you a quick story? I'm cracking up because the no sex before marriage thing, I was rejected from a medical school on that basis.
What do you mean?
I wrote this essay. It was like, write an essay about anything you're passionate about.
Mhm.
And this is me at 21. I was passionate about no sex before marriage and wrote an essay about it. And the school is very liberal, very, like, probably 80% of the population is LGBTQ, which I did not know at the time. And they were like, you are the wrong culture fit. Like, you just are not going to fit in here.
That's so interesting.
I was like, wait, why are they telling me that? Because I'm Indian? Like, what? I'm so confused. And I found out years later that it was because of my essay
Really?
that I was like, really? Like, sometimes you don't think about it as a kid. You're like, whatever, like, this is what I believe, right? And I was like, yeah, I would die on a cross for that. You know, like, I don't really care that much. But if you're asking me something that I'm passionate about, that I like truly believe, then at this moment in my life, this is what I believe.
Yeah, and listen, you can still be liberal and believe that.
And you're going to judge me based on that.
Yeah, and you can be LGBTIQ and believe that. And you don't, just because you're have a yeah, I mean, back in the day, it's all like there's so much confusion around all those things. But like, it's interesting because sometimes even with religion, you find people observe it differently. Their beliefs around it are different. I have a couple that are both Muslim, practicing Muslims, and they see Islam so differently. Her, as a woman, she's able to see women's rights within Islam. Him, as a man,
It's like, women are meant to serve me.
in Islam, right? So he's not paying attention to what the Quran and what Islam says about women's rights.
And how to treat women.
Yes, because there's actually a lot around women's rights. I mean, it's not what, the media says it is or people believe it is. So she self-advocates a lot in the context of Islam for herself. And he's not able to see that. And so we've had to get into faith in that way because they have such different views but belong to the same religion. But we are now at a point that they're praying together every day. And it is actually bringing them closer together, which is beautiful because they have now been willing to start to see each other's perspectives. And we've learned to talk about that more openly and without judgment and so on. But it's been really interesting to see, even within one religion, which you would think would be a force that brings people together. And at least that's the similarity, even if racially or ethnically they're different, that can also be a point of contention.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like human nature is such that we want to find the differences, right? Like, oh, we're the same, but we're so different. We're the same religion, but we believe it differently. Yeah. Or I'm Christian, but I'm Protestant and you're Catholic. Yeah. Whatever, so right? Like I think it's easier for humans to see each other as different.
Why?
I feel like, I don't know. What comes to mind is like, if you have a black dot on a white wall. All you see is the black dot versus the white wall. Right? Like the entire wall is freaking white. It's all the same except for that one thing. But that's the one thing that we pick out as like, oh, but that's so different.
Makes sense.
So I feel like for me, I try to like take a step back and like see the white wall. Like we're all fucking same. We're more same than we're different.
Same than different. Way more same than different. But, it becomes complicated, I think, for a lot of people around the holidays and these times where there are sort of societal structures in place. And then there's cultural structures in place. And then there's family structures and expectations. And then you are trying to like make it make sense within all of that. Like, how do you do that? I think I've mentioned before that in my previous marriage, my ex-husband did not celebrate any like holidays, right? So the only thing we would celebrate were birthdays. And I was okay with that because truly, I don't like the commercialism of Christmas. I am not a Christian, so the religious component of Christmas doesn't do anything for me personally. I respect it, and I actually did go to church quite a few Christmases because my dad was like, we do every religion in this house. And I was like, cool, we do every religion. And that's very much how I grew up. He's very Hindu, but very open-minded and has read all the books of all the religions and can tell you everything about every religion. So that's what I grew up in. And so there was never a like, mine is better or you should practice this way. Grew up with like, do you have an open mind and whatever you decide to choose is okay. So not doing holidays for me for a long time was fine. But then, once that relationship was over, I did want Asaya to have the festiveness that comes with the holidays and just the fun part, because I think that once again, it doesn't have to be all the things that it is for other people. Like you can make it into whatever it is that you want for yourself. And now I happen to have a partner who is very into those things and enjoys doing those things. And he also comes from a bigger family where they did these things, and they had more tradition around it. And so it's nice to invite that in and take a look at, well, what can we do through that lens? And how can we integrate, holiday in a way that makes sense for us, where it doesn't have to be about all this other stuff, but it can be like what we make it.
So what have you guys come up with?
So, we do Christmas a little bit more traditionally, but we're very, conscious. Like we don't, like our, Asaya didn't grow up believing in Santa Claus. Seven does not believe in Santa Claus. It's like, we liken it to any other fictitious character. Like it's a fictitious character and you can still have fun with it. You don't have to believe that it's bringing you presents for you to have fun with the concept of it. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't think that takes away the magic of Christmas. Like to me, gifts showing up under your tree from a big fat dude, like, I don't know, like that's magical only because we tell the story in that way. We can tell lots of stories in whatever way to make that just as magical. That's just my view on it. So we do the tree, and we do the family part is really the part that I think, like we'll make an evening and we'll decorate the tree together, and it's just the doing that stuff together. And our Thanksgiving is a little bit funny. Thanksgiving is like one that I think most people just do family stuff and like figure that out. And I don't know that there's like a lot of, no, the truth is I think a lot of people do have drama around Thanksgiving because it's like, which family house do we go to? Which, like, all that stuff. One, because I'm Canadian, my parents are in Canada, so we don't have that problem. We have a different Thanksgiving in Canada. And two, Canada's not big on Thanksgiving. So like it's always been me doing my partner's life or family. And so we've done most Thanksgivings together with Ty's family. But since moving here to Houston and not being around family, we did Friendsgiving last year with you guys. And we just kind of do our own thing. Like Asaya has to fly to Toronto to do, New York to see his dad. So our Thanksgiving looks a little bit different because he's not with us any Thanksgiving. I remember growing up being really envious of the people also because I had no siblings, right? Like really being envious of those people who had that family part of Christmas and holidays, right? Like that for me was the missing factor because I felt really lonely and I felt really like, my parents are cool, but like it's parents. It's not like it didn't, but we would always have like parties and functions to go to where I would get my fill, but it wasn't in the home in those moments where you see like on TV the family coming together and doing all the joyous things, right? So I do try to build that in for the kids. And I will say a little easier with 2 kids than when I only had 1 kid. And I would love to hear like what your thoughts are on that, having 1 kid, because I did have only 1 kid for a very long time. And we didn't celebrate Christmas for most of the years that I had 1 kid. Um, and I felt like it was a little lonely for him. Like I felt like he felt not like he was missing out because I don't think he was super aware of how other people were doing Christmas because he didn't have a lot of exposure to it. But I think now that it has spent some years, almost the same number of years now, doing Christmas this other way, he really enjoys it. And so for many years, we would fly back to Toronto and do Christmas there with friends and so on. And so he like started seeing, oh, there's like this opportunity for lots of people to come together, which is kind of unfortunate because he comes from a huge family on his dad's side. But because his dad never chose to do holidays, we would always kind of be the only ones who weren't participating in some of those things. Thanksgiving, we would. So for him, Thanksgiving has become that, where it's like he flies back to New York and he sees all of his dad's side of the family. And it almost is like a family reunion. So I want that for him. And I want him to be exposed to that because that is his family. And that is part of what these holidays are about. And so, our Christmas is much smaller than his Thanksgiving, but we try to just include those elements of it. And we decorate and they have a lot of fun decorating and try to make it festive. Also, like I will say, I'm getting fulfilled through it. Like I'm not ashamed to say that like some of the things that I missed and felt badly about and felt lonely about growing up, I'm able to now compensate and do for my kids and for myself in a way that feels nice. It feels nice. So I think we found a happy medium. They don't do Santa Claus. We don't do Santa Claus in our house. There's no Santa Claus. Yeah, there's no Santa Claus.
Neither do we.
Yeah, there's no
I think
Santa
our
Claus.
kid figured out at like 4 that there's no such thing.
Claus. And
We've like,
that
I
destroyed over it.
no. He's like, I saw you putting the presents under the tree. That's not Santa Claus.
My wallet is Santa Claus. Yeah, like
So now he knows, and he unfortunately pops everybody else's bubble. So
that's right. Yeah,
he's like, it's no Santa Claus. What's wrong with you?
That's the
That's
only
not
thing
real.
A lot of parents are like,
that's
exactly.
And
for it.
of course, parents like hate us
I
for
don't
it.
get the
so
whole Santa Claus thing anyway.
I don't get the whole
Also,
Santa
I
Claus
feel
thing
similarly,
anyway.
like, the first
Because
Christmas
I
ever,
feel similarly like the first
and
Christmas
it was, like,
ever.
it's probably like in the morning.
And
I-
it was
like, I
it's
could-
probably like 1 in the morning, and like I could hear someone
We're,
was
like,
doing
waking up.
something outside. So I remember like waking up and being like, "What's
Putting
happening?" And it was my dad like putting gifts under, wrapping gifts and putting them under the tree. And I was like,
So
"Oh,
my other
okay,
thing about that too
whatever."
is like most people have gifts under the tree for some days and weeks before Christmas. So who brought those? Santa just keep coming up every day? like where like the logic, because most people don't have their tree bare and then all of a sudden Christmas Eve is like filled up overnight.
Well, no, but you know what? Usually, like parents or families that really are into this whole Santa Claus thing, they often will have loads of presents under the tree already. And then you're adding a few little things here and there, and it's probably not noticeable of like, oh, there's more presents under the tree now.
So who brought those other presents?
No, Santa Claus brought them like 3 weeks beforehand.
That's not the story. Santa Claus comes on Christmas Eve and he comes through the freaking like chimney and then he eats the cookies and drinks the milk and leaves the gifts. That's the story. So there's a gap in the story. There's such a
Too technical.
but I'm saying though, I'm like
3-year-olds buy this shit.
Okay.
6-year-olds buy this shit.
If I was 6 years old and there's already presents under the tree, I'd be like, "Who brought those? Santa already came."
Here, take my cookie.
Right. Like, yeah, so we don't do milk and cookies or anything like that, but we. And I think, now you see everybody's everything on Instagram and all this shit, right? And I think it's cute that people go all out. And I think, but I also definitely think there are so many different ways to do these things without taking the joy or the magic or whatever people say out of the experience. Like Seven's about to lose her first tooth. Like it is so close, so close. And there's no tooth fairy in this. Like we don't do that. We don't. Yeah,
He also knows there's no tooth fairies. So
we don't do
we do that. Let me tell you the one thing that he really still believes.
What's that?
The switch witch.
What's the switch witch? I don't even know what that is.
I invented the switch witch last year on Halloween because we did Halloween with like going around and asking for candy, right? What trick or treating, which I hate. Like I hate this holiday so much.
Me too.
And the idea of like going around and begging other people's houses for candy is just whatever. Like not into it. It's such a weird concept to me. So I never did it growing up. I was like, Halloween, what the hell? No. Like
Were you allowed
lock up the doors. Let's go to bed.
Wow.
Like that's how averse I've been most of my life.
Even as a kid?
Even as a kid. I got into it as a teenager, but it was only from the aspect of like, oh, I'm going to go out and socialize with my friends, right? So it wasn't really like, oh, I want to go and get candy. Like I can go buy my own candy. Like it's so dumb. This is so dumb. So yeah, anyway, so last year he did Halloween. He got dressed up for really the first time and went trick-or-treating. And he came back with a bucket load of candy. And I was like, you can't eat any of it because it's not vegan. So the switch witch is going to come tomorrow morning. If you put all your candy out on the porch, she will come and take the candy and leave you a present instead.
Oh, I like that. I like that. That's a good one. That's what happened. I'm with it. Because I, too, am not like, I'm not opposed to it. I think you can look at it from different perspectives. Similarly, Asaya was not allowed to go get dressed up or do Halloween until I separated from my ex-husband, in which case I let him dress up. I did not let him trick or treat. And so he had never, he's about to be 13. He's never trick or treated, ever, ever, ever. He has gone trick or treating with friends and I did not let him get candy, which a lot of parents would be like, why not? That's so crazy. Listen, we all have different rules and different,
That's good. That's a good idea. Like, why even collect the candy if you're not
going to eat it? Right. So we would, but then it's also kind of like, I don't think he felt like he was missing out. He kind of knew that that's what our rule was, or my rule was at the time. And I was navigating very tricky divorce. So I was like, let me not stir the pot all the way too much. Like already dressing up was like a big deal. And so we did that for like 2 or 3 years where because his friend from school would have all the kids over and that they would do a group kind of like go. And then in Brooklyn, we had like, there would be brownstones that would have like little haunted houses and different little activities and stuff. So we would do that stuff. Okay. And when the kids were going up to ask for the candy, he would just hang back. And not every kid was even wanting to, because some of the kids were like, because he was hanging back, they were hanging back too. So it became like not a big deal. And it wasn't really just about, let me go get this candy. And so with 7, she's actually never gone trick-or-treating either. This year is going to be her first time trick-or-treating.
Yeah.
I don't feel terribly bad about it. I can control how much candy she consumes, which I do anyway. You know what I mean? She's certainly not going to see most of that shit that comes back in the house. And it will be redistributed at her birthday party 2 days later to the other kids. Yes, that is the plan for right now.
We can bring over all of our candy, please. Because I felt awful last year. I was like, I can't believe I have to throw all of this away.
Yeah. It's
like people spent money on this. It's going directly into the trash.
Into the garbage, yeah. Yeah, so, there's a way to do it where they don't have to get the candy, but I would prefer doing just those sort of scheduled activities that are around Halloween, like the kids' stuff, like if it's the farm, if it's the whatever, pumpkin patch, or if it's like some kind of like Halloween activity that doesn't include the trick-or-treating part. But listen, I grew up trick-or-treating. My parents took me trick-or-treating every year. I don't remember consuming a bunch of candy. They weren't really like they weren't strict about it, but there were boundaries around it. And I don't think I was like, "Oh my God, I don't get to eat all the candy." Like I wasn't upset about it. I just had fun in the moment. And that's really at the end of the day what I want for the kids in terms of all of the holidays, all of the traditions. It's like building good memories and having the ability of choice too. So I want to also show them that they get to choose how they execute on these things as they grow up too. Like there are different ways that people choose to do things. They can choose their own way eventually as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah. And what do you guys do around Christmas, like here now?
So our um when we talked about it and we were like, okay, what is going to be our tradition? Like, what are we creating together? And I think both of us kind of agreed that we like the idea of some sort of service, something around Christmas or Thanksgiving or somewhere in between. Like, it doesn't really matter. But we haven't found anywhere that we want to volunteer. It's weird.
That's interesting.
And like I want to feel like I want to do it, not just to do it because it's the thing to do. And there's a lot of like what are they called? Like the places that you would go and serve food, soup kitchen type places. And we're like, yeah, we're not really trying to serve meat to people. Like,
Oh, yeah. That's not aligned with your own values. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Like what we used to do, and this is another option around Thanksgiving, what we would do, aside old school, they would do this big Thanksgiving thing, and we would take all the leftover food and get Tupperware containers, and there was a men's shelter, and we would go distribute the food. So that was one thing we did. But around Christmas time, what a friend of mine and I did every year, and we would bring Asaya with us, is we would buy socks and gloves. And we would distribute socks and gloves to homeless people that we would just encounter on the street. And we would just because socks are apparently the number one thing that homeless people need. Yes, because their feet get wet, because their shoes are not usually in good condition. And so their feet take a lot of the brunt of damage. So, and in New York, obviously cold, so gloves. So we would buy a bunch of socks and gloves, and we would package them up, like a couple of pairs of socks and a pair of gloves, and we would just go distribute them to
that sounds awesome.
people.
Can we do that? Do you want to do that?
Absolutely, yeah.
I would really love to do that.
Yeah.
Like that sounds like a good thing to do.
Yeah, and it's not food, and there's...
Where are the homeless in Houston?
Are you kidding me? Where are not the homeless in Houston? They're all over downtown Houston. They are everywhere. Are you kidding me? Well, you don't spend enough time. Yeah. Yes, it is. It is actually a I don't want to say it's a thing for the city, the amount of homeless population. And there's not a lot of places for them to go, and there's not a lot of regulation around how they live. So it is rampant. Like it is, and it is in places that I'm trying to say this as kindly as possible, because like they're homeless, they can't help it. Like, but it's a problem. Like in the theater district, they're everywhere. So
that's the place to go for us to go distribute.
But it's spread. There's no one place. It's not centralized. They're everywhere, and there's a huge population of homelessness in Houston. So it's abundant. Yeah. And the difference is, I will say that what I've noticed in Houston versus New York is there's a lot more angry and afflicted mentally and so on homeless people on the street here. In New York, I think we did not encounter that quite as much. There was a lot of course, as New York City is a lot of homeless people, but there wasn't this level of anger and this level of mental illness. And Ty was working for Metro for a while, so he was downtown at all hours, all the time. So he has seen lots of stuff. And he, born and raised in Queens, like he's like, yo, it's different here. So you have to be a little bit more careful. But a good service is a good service. And I will say, I do see a lot of times people out there with trucks and their cars with food and blankets and resources for people. I see it all the time. So people are in service for sure, and there's an ability to serve. But I think that's one of the most beautiful things that we can do as a tradition for any sort of, I mean, any time. It doesn't have to be holiday time. But while we're sitting here wondering how should we celebrate, I think it's just such a important thing to also celebrate like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of why we wanted to do it. And we had found an organization in Hayward where we lived in the Bay Area, where we literally did just that. Like, I don't think they included socks, but it was like toothpaste and toothbrush and like amenities, like basic things that would be useful, and make like gift bags out of it and then go distribute it. We didn't go and distribute. We just they needed help to make the bags.
Yeah, no,
There you go, make the bags.
load up our car, and there was one really, really big prominent men's shelter in like not far from us. And so around there would be a lot of people because they knew that they could go there to, and not just men, women too, to get things. So we would just go in that neighborhood.
I feel like we should do that for women. Like women's shelter, and include like
Sanitary napkins and yeah, I'm down to do that 100%. And I think it's so important for
maybe not sanitary napkins, but reusable cups,
well,
menstrual cups.
how do they wash? How do they, you know what I mean? Like that's I feel like,
Well, like I like the reusable aspect of it, but yeah, how do they? But they're washing in the back.
yeah, but sometimes they don't have access in a shelter. But I also think, you know, and this is like way like on a tangent for sure, but I think there's also a comfort level with that stuff that we would have to think about also, right? So I think it's just standard is probably better and easier than that for right now. But I think it's so important for our kids to see that too, and to be part of that as well, because I think a lot of times some of these holidays have become just about what do I get? Get. Even Halloween, candy, get, right? Christmas, absolutely.
Well, here's an idea, and I'm happy to help organize it. Like, we can create a day. I feel like our friends and their kids would want to participate. So, like, everyone, come one, come all kind of thing. We put the bags together and then go deliver them wherever we decide.
Yeah, I would love to do that. Yeah, I would love to do that. And I think that will make the holidays feel more relevant and more important and more like it's not just about us. Yeah, because it never is. It never is. And we have enough. We don't need any more. Like, we truly don't. I am like racking my brain for like, what do I get these kids for? Like, both my children's also their birthdays are right before Christmas. So Seven's is on next Friday, and then Asai's is in December. And so it's like they don't need a bunch of shit. They really, really don't. And so I would rather them get one thing that's important and then be in service and see, how do I give to people? How do I help people? How do I make people's lives happier and not just my own?
Yeah, I agree. And like, honestly, the few homeless I've seen in Houston,
That is wild
that
to me.
Avery has been with me, and he will literally be like, Mom, do you have money? Can we give them money? Like, he's so in tune with it. We just haven't like encouraged him, right? So yeah, like really would love to organize this. I think it's very awesome.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fantastic. I'm actually very, very excited to do that because it's just the gratitude is just so amazing. Like people are just so grateful for the most simplest of things, and it just makes you put things in perspective in a completely different way. And like I remember just socks and gloves, and the men especially were just like they couldn't say thank you enough. Like, just a simple thing. Like nobody thinks about that. But we researched and we're like, what is the number one need for homeless people? And it was socks.
You just order boxes of
Yeah, just get a bunch of socks. Like I think we just like went to Family Dollar and just bought like big 6-packs of like different sizes of socks and just packaged them up with the same with gloves and just made little care packages. And then we were just handing out the package. Yeah. And to some people, they'd be like, can we get one for this person, that person, whatever. I'm like, I don't know if you're just trying to take them all for you, but I hope you're paying it forward.
right. I feel like, yeah, it's rare that people take advantage of it in that way.
Who knows? I don't know. But that's not even for us to, judge or care about. It's like,
If you can carry 3 of them, have at it.
yeah, listen. If you were resourceful enough to ask, then maybe you deserve it anyway. So it's fine. But I think, this is, of course, a little bit different than navigating that scenario as a couple, having to contend with your own traditions and your own values and stuff like that. But that I think it's a great example of something that you can do to build a new tradition internally in your family. There's different ways that you can do something like this. It doesn't have to be in service because that's not everybody's thing. Some people are just concerned about their own family and their own traditions and their own stuff, but you can always integrate.
Finding like what are the values that you both share? What's the commonality? And then let's build a tradition around that for people that don't have a lot of family traditions.
And for people who do have a lot of family traditions, I think it's important also to check in and see, well, is this part of my value system? Is this something that I actually like? Why do I believe in this? Why do I still do this? Like, does it still resonate for me? Does it apply to my life, who I am? Because in a lot of cases, people will be like, oh, I don't even know why we do that. Like that we just do it because we do it. And it's like, okay, so then why are you so like, we have to do this if you don't even know why you're doing it? Right? Because then that causes conflict internally in the relationship. And it's like, yeah, well, you don't even know why you're doing it or why it's important to you or why,
But that's the way it's always been.
that's the way it's always been. And it's like, okay, great. Well, you can do it differently. And now it's going to be, that's the way it's always been done. And that's how things change. But, I don't think it has to be as big a deal as people allow it to be, because I think it's an allowance and I think it's a choice that people make to not find compromise around these things. And if you are in a relationship where compromise is not being made, then you have other problems. It's not about the holidays. It's about having aligned values and checking in with each other and knowing each other and respecting each other and having understanding. And like, it's about so many other things. It's not about traditions during the holidays at all.
Yeah, that's very fair. I feel like sometimes we're just so lucky that we don't have a lot of tradition to contend with either of us. Like we're both it's like, yeah, we don't have shit. So what do we want to do? Yeah. How do we want to do this?
Same.
And it has like a degree of freedom with it that a lot of traditional people don't or like can't even imagine, right?
For sure. I can't imagine it the other way. Like, I don't know what that world is like to have
To like feel so bound by tradition or by your family or whatever. Like, I just don't understand it.
There's that one movie that had just come out. I think it was on Netflix, I want to say, not that long ago, where the Indian guy with I think she's like Norwegian, girlfriend. And there's like a Christmas scene where she brings him to Norway. I want to say it's Norway, I'm pretty sure, to her family's Christmas. And the way that they do Christmas is so stuffy and so like not who he is at all. I have to find the name of the movie, but it was a really interesting depiction of when you are steeped in tradition and you have no idea why, and you try to bring someone outside of your culture into it who is like, what the fuck is this shit? And you're being judged by your ability to integrate into the tradition. And that's the judgment, right? It's like there's only one way, and it's like you have to assimilate. And it's like, dude, that's not my culture. It's not my religion. It's not my way of doing things. That's not how I see things. I'll participate and I'm happy to be here, but don't have the same expectation for me as you do for everybody else. And then certainly don't discount me and judge me and like cast me aside because I'm not doing it that way. But I think that happens to so many people that's if you don't assimilate, if you don't integrate, then you're just not the right person for that. You know, like you've been discounted completely.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if that's what's happening with my Indian friends.
Maybe.
Or lack thereof.
I don't know. Perhaps. I wouldn't be surprised. I think, you know, a lot of times, I don't know a lot of Indian people personally who are super steeped in Indian tradition. That's just, I guess, I don't. And so,
I think I live in the Mecca for it.
like, what do you mean?
There's just so many traditional Indians here.
Oh, here. Oh, in this community. Yes, not where I live. And so, yeah, we live in the same city, but like, yeah, I know there are. And I just am not exposed to them. I think I was a little bit when we lived in Siena, like when we lived more in a different neighborhood, and I started to see them and I was like, oh, they're different Indians. Like they're different than we are. And I'm used to that having grown up in Toronto, of course. But like, again, so far removed from it and have not chosen those people as friends because they couldn't be my friends and I couldn't be their friend. Therefore, like, it's like the exposure is so limited and it is a conscious choice to not be in that world because like I don't fit in, I don't agree, and you don't certainly agree with the way I do things. So we not friends. It's that simple. We not cool. But I would like more access. I would like to be able to know how to access certain functions and cultural events more than I do now, but do it my own way. Like, but I want my kids to have the exposure because I want them to see like this is also their group of people. Like this is also what they're of. Right. And I know Asaya, especially because he's much older and he doesn't feel super comfortable in Indian spaces.
Well, I don't, yeah. Avery doesn't either. I don't even think I've heard Avery like really claim his Indianness in any way.
Asaya very much claims his Indianness. Very much so. Like it's very I'm Indian and I'm Black. I'm Indian and I like it, and it's very I'm like Indian. Like very much so. Very much so.
And it's great. And it's like y'all are tight. So I would expect that to a certain degree. Avery's not fully aware of it. Yeah.
He's also much younger.
He's not quite like aware that there's some difference.
Yeah. That's also an age thing.
But I can see it with his Indian school friends. There's definitely like it's starting to differentiate. Like Indian parents are not necessarily going to invite him to stuff.
Yeah, you said that. That's really weird to me. That's really weird to me. That's so strange.
Yeah. But it's very different on the Black side is like, oh, you're Black. Come on. Right? Like, and even if you're not, like, you're included in some ways. I feel like it's a more inclusive environment. And maybe it's just what I put out, but.
I think yes, it is a more inclusive environment. I think that's just across the board. I think, Black people, I know that there's a lot of discussion and a lot of opinions around Black people's propensity to claim you as Black when you're a mixed race person. But I think it's different being mixed race with another person of color than being mixed race with white, one. I think Black and white is a little bit more like you're on the polar opposite side, whereas Black and something that still gives you melanin and still gives you culture and still gives you something might be easier for the Black community to accept, and we would have to talk to Black people about that. And I certainly do not want to be speaking for the Black community on this, but in my experience, I have always been accepted 1000%, never, ever experienced a lack of, and I have been dating Black men since I was 16, so it's been a minute, and I've been in lots of different relationships and have a lot of Black friends, and I grew up in a Black neighborhood. So I have never not felt accepted. And I don't think Asaya has ever not felt accepted by Black people, ever, 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 ever. And yes, he presents as Black and he looks more Black than he does Indian. So it is easy for him to integrate into those spaces for sure. But he has definitely felt otherness in Indian spaces for sure.
And I feel like Indians have a tendency towards like, oh, you're weird, you're different, you're not a part of us.
They will easily, but I will say when he's around my parents' friends and so on that are Indian, he does not feel that at all because they are very inclusive and very like he's just like all their other friends' grandchildren who are not Black. You know what I mean?
But that's a different generation, different story, and your parents are like, this is my grandchild.
Yes, for sure. But I will say there's always a comment about his hair. Always, always, always. Always, but he also wears a big afro, right? So, but there's always a comment about his hair. And I wonder, I mean, it's not a big deal to me, nor does he think it's a big deal at all. I wonder if he was anybody with a big thing of hair, if there would be a comment. Maybe if he had a man bun, there would be a comment, right? Like, oh, look at that hair. But maybe there would be. But in other foreign Indian spaces, he definitely has felt like I'm not Indian enough, or I'm not Indian in this space. Like I stand out.
Yeah.
And so that's been interesting. And I wonder what that's going to look like for Seven, because we haven't gotten there yet because she's only little. So, it's interesting.
Yeah. I feel like for Avery, he presents more Indian. So that's also why I'm like, you can't tell if you didn't know that he was biracial. I don't think you can tell that he's biracial.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
As soon as you know he's biracial, you're like, oh, yeah, I see that. Okay.
Yeah.
But until that point, if you didn't know that, it wouldn't even come up. So there's still some aspect of like, oh, he's different. That is surprising to me.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Like you see your own kids as just your kids, right? So I don't spend a whole bunch of time looking at them and like, so what do you look more like? And who's going to accept you more? But I do realize like if Seven had different hair, maybe she would look more Indian. I don't know. But I am now starting to see that she is perceived as Black, whereas I don't see it as much as I see it with Asaya, where when I look at Asaya, my brain can see, like, yes, he's my son, and I'm not looking, but I can see why people perceive him the way that they do, because he's also darker skinned. He also has a big afro. And so, and his features are more pronounced. With Seven, her features are a little smaller, like just overall, but she has curly hair. And so to me, I'm like, I don't know what people perceive her as, but I'm starting to hear from people when they see me, like, oh, like, because they think that she's Black. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. So like, how will she navigate the world? And I know this is separate than this holiday conversation that we're having, but it all, it all is part of that conversation when you're trying to figure out what is the best thing for my family? What is the best thing for this world that I've created that is parts of different cultures, and, also about how other people perceive you, and also about how you experience the world. And, at the end of the day, for me, it's like we've built this little life in this little world, in this little insular world, and we get to determine and decide what we make it.
Yeah. And lucky for us that we do.
And for those of you who don't get to do that, there's still a way.
Yeah. I feel like it's about claiming what you want and doing it.
Yeah, you got to know what you want first, though.
Right. Well, and if you, even if you don't, like, you can still figure it out, but you could also just be like, yeah, that's not what I'm doing. Right. Like, and I think a lot of people just don't do that because they feel somehow indebted or somehow tied to or burdened by whatever they were brought up with.
For sure. Lots of guilt around it. Lots and lots of guilt and lots of like pressure and lots of like, I owe somebody something.
Yeah. I think even all of my friends that I know, I think we are outliers in very similar ways. Like, we are like kind of pushed the boundaries. We've done some testing. We've done some like, this is my truth and I'm going to bring it forth into the world, and not everyone is that way.
No. And it's important, I think, for us to recognize that not everyone is that way and have empathy for it, because for us, I think it's easy for us to be the way that we are. And it doesn't take a lot of effort or energy because it just is. And I think we have been this way always. So yes, always. And therefore pushing boundaries or testing things or choosing different things at different times in our lives, all of which have felt true to us, has just been part of the journey, right? Like that, like not for us, not celebrating and then choosing to celebrate, that to me that's not contradictory to me. That's like just two different choices at two different times based on two different sets of values, on two different sets of circumstances. Like, that's available to everyone, right? But it's like, it has to be that internal desire and that internal courage to go claim it, like you said, right? To go make it happen and actually choose it and say, okay, I can cancel the outside noise, even if there's a lot of pressure and expectation, and I still get to choose what's right for me, for us. And I think we're just very fortunate that we've been pushing that agenda always. But you're right in that that's just not everybody's ability to do that.
If you're out there and you're listening to this and you're like, how can I do this? I think at some point you just have to claim it, and then like there will be fallout, but you will figure it out.
Yeah, it's really just baby steps, right? And it's just about deciding what it is you want, and then taking the steps to do it, to implement it. And it doesn't have to be overnight.
Yeah.
And it can be slowly, but it can also be overnight. And you also have the right to choose something very different than what you've chosen in the past, and to create something different, and to not celebrate a thing that maybe doesn't feel right to you anymore. Because like, I think there's a bunch of people out here blindly celebrating a lot of things, right?
Gore. Yeah, that's how the big box stores make money.
That is literally, it was created so that the big box stores can make money. Like, literally, that's what a lot of Christmas is not Christ's birthday, but that's a whole nother conversation for another day, right? So that's it. Like, yeah, we've been sold a lot of shit that people just blindly believe. And so you don't have to believe it. And you can do it in the way that feels right to you.
To be continued.
Closer to the holidays. It is already close, but we'll revisit it again and see how we...
I'm sure there will be more. Yeah.
All right. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.